situation. It's also great to have these numbers piled up because there are going to be lots of opportunities, particularly in high school with 18 substitutions, right, to put in a serve specialist at the most critical time during a game and know with confidence that person will put the ball in and put it in, with enough pace. Okay. All right, so these are my little pet peeve kind of things. So you can say, well, I think that's BS. But a couple things. One, I don't think coaches are demanding enough, and the reason I say that is I don't see coaches getting upset when players do dumb things like, right, serving balls in the net, that you don't have to do that, right? They're not trying to serve a spot, they're just trying to put the ball on the court. Serving error coming out of a timeout, this is my favorite, because the whole point of the other guy's call a timeout, right? First serve error after a difficult side out. That's a difficult side out where you got you lost 5 points, and you get the ball, and now the person chucks it out of the court, okay? And then the second or third serve error in a row. These are all situations that, to me, are unacceptable, and the team should be trained out of that habit. And you should put pressure on them to make sure they don't do these things, because these are very expensive. These are morale killers. Right? So you've got to think about the emotional context of the play as well. The other thing, though, which seems completely contradictory, is coaches are too directive, calling targets and reducing effectiveness. Okay? And what I mean by this is, I watch college games all the time, right? I live next door to Stanford, and I watch the college coaches doing this stuff. And I watch how many balls actually follow those numbers. And it's shocking at the college level how many of those balls don't go to the zone they're pointing at. Okay, these guys sit there and do serving for hours on end because they got a lot of practice time compared to a high school team. Right? So you sit there and go, wow, these guys aren't serving in the spot, what are we doing? Right? And so the typical thing where people direct shots is that the balls actually aren't going there, or what happens is the players force serves they're not that good at because they haven't practiced that shot. And they try to make it and they knock it out of bounds or into the net or something like that. These articles that are referenced talk about this, and one of the key things that the UC San Diego coach said was, I think it's better to serve tough at the wrong person, right, than to serve an easy ball to the right person. Because that crappy passer, you give him an easy ball, he's got to pass the ball pretty well. So you got to make that trade-off to decide. Do you see coaches getting upset when they call this, they serve this, and they get an ace? No, I don't think so. They're not going to say, why did you serve 5 and get an ace? Right? They're not going to do that. So I'd rather have my players just ripping the ball and as hard as possible. And I'll talk a little bit about the serving zone idea here. All right, so here's the other thing about serving the odds. You got to know the side out rate, and if you're actually doing this on a stat system, you can find out what's going on relative to your opponent. Or if you've actually done some scouting, you should know kind of where they stand, right? If your opponent is under 50%, there's no reason to miss a serve. Okay, serving aces against a team like this is not a worthwhile venture. You can wipe them off the court if you just keep the ball in the court, because half their balls are going to go out, right, or in the net or something like that. They will take care of the points for you. So just put in a decent quality serve, right, and let them play. Get the ball into their court, right? I see teams come up against us that are higher than us in ranking and do things like they're playing a team of the same caliber and they're blasting these serves and they're having a bad day, so half the serves are going out. It's like, hey, you're just making us more competitive. Thank you very much, because that counts in your side out statistic, right? So my side out went from 50% to 55%. Now it's up to 60% because they missed 2 serves. It only takes 1 serve to bump you about 5%. Okay? So it's very, very dangerous to do that as you go through this process. And I'll talk a little bit more about the side out rate issue in a second. Okay, so now we're looking at the receive part of this. And one of the key things you'll see is not just looking at the rating, but the error rates. Okay? The error rates are really, really important. And you kind of need to think about what kind of system are you running, right? So think about last year's finals between Texas and Oregon. What happened there? What kind of teams were they? What kind of style of volleyball were they? You know what it reminded me of? Around the 1970s, Japan versus Russia. Okay? Ultra fast, ultra high. Right? So Texas didn't need anybody passing threes. It's like put the ball, pass the ball high, into the air. The setter can just walk up and chuck that ball 30 feet up in the air, and the hitters will take care of it. Oregon's the other way around. Perfect pass, I've never seen a setter literally bat the ball. If you've seen Plum play live, you can hear the ball coming off her hand. It's so loud, it sounds like she's doing this. Right? She goes, and that ball is like rocketing out of her hands. And it's about as flat as you can possibly set that thing without, sort of overshooting the whole thing. And it's amazing how fast that ball is traveling. And so that's how they do it, because they're not a big team. Right? Their outsides aren't very tall. The outside, I think, is 6 feet and 5'10", something like that. Right? So very, very different styles of play and very different requirements relative to what you'll need people that. So the other thing you'll notice here, though, that's really important to note is if you have 3 to 4 good passes, you're really lucky. If you have 2, you're really lucky. Okay, but the problem is when you get to 5 and 6, it falls off a cliff statistically. Every team's been like this for me, right? Look at the drop-off in the numbers and the error rates, okay? And one thing you have to remember is when you go from a 10% error rate to a 20% error rate, it's not 10%. What is it? It's double, okay? A 10% error rate, you average about 20 receives a set. That's 2 errors a set. If you go to 20, that's 4 errors a set. Rally scoring, right? 2 points is 4 points. Now you switch it from winning 25-21 to losing 21-25. Okay? So it's a very, very tricky number, and you got to keep track of that very carefully because those errors matter. And the question then becomes, what kind of system are you running? So let's look at this situation, right? We have a bunch of passers, some pretty good guys up here with different error rates, and then somebody down here who's lower with a really low error rate. Right, so who's the best passer? Well, right, just as we mentioned before, it depends on what you're trying to run. If you're highly dependent on the middle, then I think Sally's your best shot because she's pretty accurate with a low error rate. But if you're a high ball team, I think Sam's actually your best shot because she's super low, almost never makes an error. Right? So as long as the setter can get to the ball, mostly 2 balls, that's all you need. You can chuck the ball high to the outside, let the outside take care of it. Right? So that's the kind of nature of the game that you have to consider relative to how you're playing. Now, here's something to consider, right? If you see a team that's using 5 to 6 different receivers, that's the team you want to play because you know damn well those last 2 passers aren't any good. And I see a lot of teams doing these rotations where they pull the opposite back and have them pass. And I'm sitting there going like, can that opposite really pass, or are you just doing a convenient formation that makes it easier to attack? Because half the times I watch that opposite's not that good. I mean, the opposite's an opposite for a reason, right? I think half the time the opposite's like the ball, it's like the person you never want to touch the ball other than at the net. So they do these formations, and I look at it like, are you kidding me? And it looks like they're doing it because they want the setter in a little bit more, better position relative to the ball, or somebody else is going to hit from a different angle. Okay. That's exciting. All right. So again, like I say, really look at your numbers and do lots of stat drills at practice to tabulate because it will really give you an idea of where people stand. Once you get about 40 to 50 data points, 40 to 50 passes on your players, the numbers tend to basically stabilize and you won't see much jumping around. And what you'll see is you'll see the whole group sort of moving up and down as a team. And as the season progresses, the numbers tend to get better because you get more reps, they become more comfortable with each other. But the other thing that happens is if you got a lot of athletic players who haven't had a lot of experience, those people will tend to catch up more than the people who have a lot of experience already. The improvement for the upper groups will tend to be kind of incremental. The lower groups will tend to come up. On JV teams, where you have more inexperienced players who may be athletic, they tend to catch up with the lower, more experienced players. And so have an opportunity to kind of become part of the team in effect and become one of the starters, or at least a sub option to have out there. And the nice part of taking stats for passing regularly is you can see the incremental progress numerically where you can't see it on the court. Right? If you're charting that all the time, then people are instead now, it's like that person who hasn't been able to play the whole first half of the season is saying, oh man, I'm only a 10th off, from catching up to Sally. If I get to that number, I can get on the court. And that's what you should do as a coach to incent that because you want the extra help. You never know, right? Players implode and have bad games, right? And what are you going to do? You look to the bench, there's nobody there. Right? You've got to build that bench up. So having these statistics at practice is really a good way to do that. Okay, hitting. Now sometimes it's hard to get all the swings. So the question is, what number can you use as a proxy? If you just do the end of rally statistics, at least in my app, we use a stat called net kills per game, which is kills minus errors per game rather than kills minus errors over attempts. Okay? So the number's a little funky. It looks like a ratio there, right? 3.5 to 0.2. Okay? But the good news is, because the numerator is the same thing, kills minus errors, a bad hitter will either be 0 or negative in either metric. Okay? And it roughly correlates to the hitting efficiencies. So for my team, these are actual numbers. You notice that the ranking's about right. Sometimes down here, it'll flip a little bit. But it's close enough that at least you can use that number as a proxy for who the first 3 best hitters are, or the first 4 best hitters are, right? Without having to get all the touches in there. Okay, so it's a one way to kind of shortcut that process. Okay, so now here's the next question about who's the best hitter, right? So we got Meg, who's a 200 hitter, but a 60% kill rate, right? 6 kills, 4 errors over 10 attempts, and then Sam, who's 300, 30%. 3 kills, no errors. Okay. So who's the better hitter? It depends. Okay. So it depends on who you're playing. All right. So if you're playing somebody really good, then a really good opponent has a dig to kill ratio of 33%. So every third ball comes back and they put it down on your side of the court. All right. So in that situation, you don't really want a lot of balls in play. So in that case, Meg has 4 kills, 6 kills, 4 errors, plus 2 points net, right? Sam has 3 kills, but 6 balls are in play. A third of them come back, so she's only plus 1, right? So that a little bit more conservative hitter, not so great in these circumstances, could cause you a lot of work, which means there's going to be lots of rallying going on, and the more rallies that happen, the more chance for little crazy errors to occur, okay? However, if you're playing kind of an average opponent where they tend to knock a lot of balls out on their own, then keeping the ball in is a good thing. We're back to that same idea about the worse than 50% side out team, right? Keep the ball on their side of the court. So if you can't score a kill, just make sure the ball's in the court and let them make the error for you. Okay? And if you ever looked at your total point score on 25 points and look at sort of how much of it you earned versus how much of it was given to you, it's kind of shocking, right? Because there's a lot of points that you didn't earn, in that mix. So, you see these situations where you feel like, wow, the team didn't play that well, but we won by a pretty good margin. That's what's happening.
Yeah, the opposite side of that is also very enlightening too. How many giveaway points you gave?
Oh, yeah.
How many
Yeah,
points you
absolutely.
gave away by doing stupid shit?
Yeah, yeah. Those games make you crazy, right? Okay, digging. Pretty much what we all do here is it's digs per game. Now, the one thing that you have to be careful about with the digging part of this is if you have a dynamic defensive player who touches a lot of balls, they're going to get tagged with a lot of digging errors. But what I found is, in spite of them doing that, they typically dig more balls anyway. So when you do the ratio between digs and errors, they're still ahead of everybody else. Okay? I've actually never seen a situation where I've got a dynamic digger who does worse than the person next to them who's digging less balls, but making also less errors. When you do the actual percentage numbers, they do better. So hopefully it'll all work out.
So as you've been doing this, because I've noticed something that I've seen is that I have 1 or 2 players that don't touch very many balls, but pass at a very high level.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But yet at the same time, like you said, my Libra who touches a zillion balls in a season,
Right.
Her error ratio is sometimes not exactly where we want it, but
Yeah.
And it skews your judgment, right? Because you're like, oh, maybe I should put Sally in there because she doesn't make any mistakes, But then again,
Yeah.
she's only touched 4 balls, where
Right.
the other kids touched 1,000. So,
Yeah, you got to think about that, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think this is where having linkages to video helps, because then you can actually see how those errors are being generated, what kinds of errors they are, and to see if say, a player is actually maybe not even getting the balls they should be getting to, they're not getting charted for an error when they should be. This is a great example of the double libero, where one's a passing libero and one's a defending libero. Because you have different skill sets. A person like for example, I was a setter, or a defensive player most of my career, and basically I was a crappy passer. So you don't want me in there passing the ball, but I could dig a lot of balls. So that's a great place for that double libero setup where you can use a passing one, and a digging one.
I don't get to do that, Mitch.
Not in high school, right? Okay, so for blocking, the main thing you'll notice is that the blocks per game number are very low. right? And so this is a category of skill that it's really hard. It's the hardest skill in volleyball because you're trying to figure out a lot of different things going on at the same time, which is, you know, where's the attacker coming from? How high is the set? How far off the set is it? How fast is it going? All those, and then the middle has to get out there on top of that, right? So the middle's moving on top of trying to figure out all those stuff. It's like this incredible triangulation thing going on. It's super complicated. And so getting good at this is a hard thing to do. And my suggestion generally is if your opponent cannot put the ball to the floor on an open net consistently, don't get crazy about this. Do conservative blocking, which means do locational blocking. Have a plan and say, we're going to allocate or not allocate over the middle and do commit blocking to the outside. Pick a plan. Make it simple for your players so that they can put up a quality block, which means block off a zone. You're not trying to score a point. You're just trying to make it not messy for the defenders behind them. Put up a clean block, right, as the plan, rather than trying to penetrate and shut them down. Okay, because I think coaches tend to get a little bit crazy about trying to shut them down at the net, when in reality, you're probably better off getting a deflection, picking off that deflection and setting that up in transition. Okay? So it's a strategy thing you have to consider for your league and decide, you know, between your personnel and the quality of your league, should you be investing a ton of time here? Okay, so now we're going to look at the rotational part of this, right, using the side-out percentage and point scoring. And this is where the program really helps you, because as an example, right, we're looking at receive example, and we see rotation 4's got a low number, it's 44 compared to the other numbers there, right? And the question becomes, you know, what's happening, okay, in that particular rotation? Now, rotational analysis is really helpful, right, for practice purposes, because instead of spending 1 hour on 6 rotations, you can spend 1 hour on 1 or 2 rotations, which makes it a heck of a lot better learning experience. And, you know, this is about potholes, right? So you want to get those potholes out of there, because if you don't, you get these situations where you lose 5, 6 points in a rotation. It's not only losing points, it's also psychologically not great. Right? Your team gets down and everybody's kind of scrambling now, and you know, morale goes down, right? It's much better to try to even those out rather than getting better at the better rotations where you're holding the ball down. You know, so it's a balancing act thing, but it's really important to focus in on that. This is just a counterexample with serving, so just nothing new there. Okay, now we'll do a quick review. So first step, right? We want to compare ourselves to the competition, right? We want to make sure we have the right people, and then look at our side-out percentages. Now we can dig a little bit deeper from here and go to the next level. So the question becomes, if you were to click on this, what do you get? And this is where the software kind of matters. Most of the applications won't give you the next level here. In Solsas and the web reports part of it, what happens is if you click on it, you get a secondary screen that shows you exactly how you won and lost those points. And in this particular instance, rotation 4, Charlotte's got 3 hitting errors. Okay? And it turns out Charlotte's the opposite. She's hitting with a back row. Right? And if you link this to video, you can get more information about how is she losing those points. Okay? So very targeted. I can just take Charlotte off on the side and just set her D balls all afternoon on a separate group, right, without having to involve the rest of the team and get her to improve her swing. Okay? So that's a way to isolate the problem. And again, you're talking about return on investment of your time, right? You want to focus in on the problem areas and resolve them. Now, there's 2 parts of this problem, which is there's a technical and a tactical problem. The technical problem is skill, right? If she's hitting the ball well, or maybe the sets are bad. And the second problem is tactical. Should she be getting set the ball at all? Right? So those are 2 things that you can consider, and you as a coach can make the decision, hey, you know what, we're not setting her any D balls out of this rotation, we're just going to forget that side of the court. Maybe that's a decision, I don't know. It's certainly going to change things, so you know, you decide whether or not that's a good call or not, right? But it's a quick fix. You know, it's no sort of investment in training time when you do that.
But when I look at that, your Francesca had as big a problem, she can't pass the ball.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, she's -3 too, so she cost you, right? Not only with the hitting, but we lost
Oh,
our...
that's digging, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So those, I'm assuming that's an error, right? -3?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we can do that too. And figure out what's going on with her digs. And, you know, check through the video, you can really see it then. And figure out rotation 3, Francesca digs, and find out what's going on. Okay, so then the next step is to really step way back. Now that you've got some data, you've kind of figured out where your team is, and look at, you know, what's going on. And really, is the system that you've picked right for your team? So Bill Neville's quote is, you know, never do tactically what you can't do technically. right? So are your skill levels high enough for this caliber of team? What I see happening a lot is, coaches get, say, a pretty good team where they got lots of skills, and then they start running really complex offenses. And I've watched one of my club teams do this, and it was like, yeah, but then how often do you run that play? And how do you get good at it? And they end up running it against crappy teams when they don't need it, right? Because that's when they got the ball control. Against a good team, they don't have the passing, so now they can't run that play. So it's kind of crazy because that's supposed to be for the good team that you're playing, right? So this is kind of a trade-off. I think I want to push towards more simplicity in doing things. For example, I think it's better to, instead of running a combination play, think about getting better at setting the ball from 7 feet off the net to the middle. Okay? My team got very good at that this year, and we were able to connect in this weird kind of, it's a one set, but it's actually a shoot set because it's so far away from the hitter. The hitter's still at the net, and it's getting pushed this way. All right? It's very hard to block that ball, and it's a question of timing, but that ball happens a lot because, of course, my team only passes 25% perfect, so lots of balls are going to be off the net. That's a 2 ball. Okay? Okay, so let's see, how are we doing timeouts?
Yeah.
5 o'clock, 7 o'clock?
Uh,
All right, so let me jump to the video portion because I think this is good to see. Okay, so let me switch to the video application. All right. Let me show you how to synchronize first, and then I'll give you a sample of what it actually does, okay? So this is a video that I took, and it's been posted to YouTube. And so, let's stop it, for that. And I'll click the share button, and down here is the URL for that. And then I'm going to switch over to the synchronizing app, which is something.